Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of 10 or Less, the educational podcast series where I take a boring chapter from a textbook and turn it into a video 10 minutes or less. Today, we'll be looking at water pollution. So, what is water pollution? Any chemical, biological, or physical change in the water quality that is harmful to living organism or makes the water unsuitable for use. The two main problems that we have with water pollution come from one, point sources, which is pollution emitted from a specific location, such as a sewer pipe or drain, or non-point sources, which are basically scattered sources that cannot be traced back to one specific location. If you want to know what non-point sources are, rain. That's one of them. Sewer pipes, drains, you can pretty much tell, but rain, not so easy to tell. So some of the major water pollutants: infectious agents that cause disease, plant nutrients, we'll talk about this later with fertilizers, organic and inorganic chemical toxins, sediment and dust, and thermal pollution. Surprisingly, temperature actually does count as a pollution, water pollution when it comes to that. But yeah, you can see why it's really important because we don't want to be drinking dirty water. So, pollution of streams. This is streams are one of the main reasons that we see this happening, or we see people noticing water pollution, because lots of things go on in streams, and once you disturb it, problems occur. So, point source pollution, is well managed in streams, but non-point source is not. One of the biggest concerns during streams, water pollution of streams, was that there would be a factory designated by those little buildings up there, spewing basically sewage into the rivers. What would happen is, if you notice where the arrows are, that's where the sewage would enter the stream, and right outside of it, right nearby, downstream of it, would create a septic zone. This would basically be a place where things would die and decompose, and the decomposition, when you're decomposing things, little microbes, they'll eat away at all that organic matter, but in doing so, what they'll do is they'll start to consume all that oxygen, and you created basically a dead zone where nothing can live. From there, you have a slight recovery zone where things start to come back to life again, and much further beyond that, you have a clean zone where things are back to normal. But if you have a lot of factories along the river, you can see why this would cause so many problems. Next, pollution of lakes. The biggest problem with lakes is that there's too little flow and too little mixing. Lakes actually are very interesting in that they have their own ecosystem going on within them, because the layers are stratified. You know, the bottom dwellers at the very bottom, and little fish floating near the top, at the plankton at the very tip top of the lake catching sunlight and all that. So they have their own little ecosystem going on. But one of the biggest problems with lakes is eutrophication, where a lake will receive a lot of fertilizer in the form of nitrogen and phosphorus. What'll happen then is the little phytoplankton and the algae, they'll be like, oh my goodness, there's so much food around here. So algae will explode in population. Just a whole bunch of algae all over the place, consuming all those nutrients that they can possibly get their hands on. Unfortunately for algae, they also die. So when they do die, they float down to the bottom, and decomposition happens again. And once again, when decomposition happens underwater, you're consuming the oxygen, and eventually the little microbes that eat away at the algae, they'll run out of oxygen because there isn't enough mixing happening in the lake, so you can't get dissolved oxygen down into the lake quickly enough. What happens then is the entire lake runs out of oxygen, and every living thing in there pretty much dies. Next, we have pollution of groundwater. This is a pretty plain image that I found online that basically covers how groundwaters get polluted. First, you have the source at the very top, indicated in black. This source of pollution, whether it be a land dump or maybe an acid dump or some landfill or whatever you have, as it rains, the rainwater will leach all those harmful chemicals and harmful toxins into the water, and it'll push it down through the ground. And as it goes down further and further, it'll hit the water table, in which case it'll contaminate all the groundwater that flows down from it. This is really dangerous because we can't really see it happening. The only way we can actually find out is if you have a well, you pull some water and you realize, hey, this water's green. But unfortunately, it's not always that simple, and you won't be able to tell the difference until several months of drinking this water when you realize, hey, my hair's falling out. But you can see why pollution of groundwater is so serious, because we actually don't have that much fresh water on the surface, and most of California at least relies on groundwater and ice melt. If we don't have one of those, that's a big chunk of water that we're not getting. Next is the pollution of oceans. When we say oceans, we're actually mainly looking at the coastline simply because that's where we see things happening the most. Urban runoff, such from such like cities. One thing that comes to mind is like San Francisco, excuse me. San Francisco, right by the bay, lots of concrete. If rain hits it, all that water is going to rush straight into the ocean. There's also agricultural runoff. This is particularly a problem near the Mississippi River and the Delta, where a lot of the agricultural runoff will enter the stream and run out into the coastal regions. Same thing happens. Lots of nutrients from the farms, because farmers will put excess amounts of fertilizer, and the algae will just have a heyday. They will eat all that up, grow, bloom into a beautiful, majestic algae float, and then they'll die and then cause eutrophication. But yeah, that's water pollution. What can we do to solve it? Well, the biggest thing is awareness. Let people know what they're doing. If you want to know some practical things, you can reduce the amount of pesticides, reduce the amount of fertilizer that you put on, compost your food. But unfortunately, there's no real direct way that you can help mitigate this. It's really just being aware of what you're doing and making sure that you can teach other people to say, hey, be a bit more considerate, be a bit more aware of what you're actually doing to the ocean. Anyways, that's all for today, and thanks for watching.